Hello. Today I'll be showing you how to animate a character turnaround with an animation mentor rig. We're going to use Darius. Um, Animating a character turnaround is basically a simple weight shift. We're going to do a 180-degree turn, but the most important principles of the weight shifts are the opposing forces, the balance, and getting some of that twist and asymmetry in it. Obviously, the classic example here is David. You can see how his hips and shoulders are compressed into each other, and there's this nice curve going through his body. His weight is all on his leg here, on his screen left leg, and if he was to have to shift his weight over, he would have to move his hips over to the other leg and rotate around. One of the things I've done in my career is this turn from the movie Iron Man 2, and it became a little bit of a viral sensation a few years ago after an interview I did about motion capture and AI. So the thing you want to start with, ideally, when you're going to do a character turn, is some video reference. And I shot some reference of myself turning around from 4 different angles, just so you could see the weight shift principles from the different angles. So here's the reference. It essentially starts with just a head turn, which leads into a weight shift onto the other leg, and then some steps, resulting in a 180-degree turn. So I'll bring this into Maya, and we can start blocking it out. All right, so here we are in Maya with the Darius rig. So before we get started, I set this up in a certain way so as I turn his body, his head follows, and as I turn his feet, his knees follow. This makes it easier and less work to counter animate if I'm going to do a character turning around in space. I have his arms in FK for this arm because it's going to release his body very quickly, and the other arm is in IK, and it's constrained to this object I made. Let's call it a spear. So that way I can have something of interest rather than just a character standing and turning without having anything he's interacting with. I thought it would be a little bit more of a challenge for the demo. So this is an object that I'm moving on its own, separate, but it drives his hand. And that way I can, if I wanted to, still animate his hand with this locator because it's parented to the spear, and it's centered around the spear, so I can easily rotate this around the spear as he pivots it and slides it. So it gives me more control. It's going to be less work to animate this way. I'll be animating with the picker, which is going to be off screen for the recording, but that's what I'm using. So the first thing I did was set up a initial pose based on the reference and a camera. The reference is here in the background. And then I just started setting up keyframes. So obviously the first key is trying to match more or less the first frame. And then we just move forward through the main storytelling beats. So one is this sort of head turn and weight shift, screen right. And then he starts to step over and rotate. And then this is like kind of the middle of the turn, right? And now I have these different camera angles to kind of check it, how it's working. And then as he gets around, it steps, and then you have your final position. So it's a short animation. And then what I kept in mind as I was blocking this out is what's happening in the body, and using the reference as a guide, but not following it verbatim. So it was important to have this breakdown here for me, which is kind of an ease into the head turn. And as you can see, nothing much is happening here. And then this one is the main weight shift, because I'm going to be turning over. I'm putting the weight onto this leg completely. So that way he can lift this leg, because if you're going to do a weight shift in real world space, you know, if you have your your weight on this leg, you know, I have my weight all on this leg, and I want to lift this leg, I have to move my weight to this other leg, so now this leg can be lifted. Because if I try to lift this leg with my weight on it, I'm just going to fall over. And this is a common, you know, mistake that students make when they're animating, is they start moving stuff around without figuring out where their weight is. And there's multiple ways to move your weight over that leg. You can like translate your body over it, or you can lean your body over it, right? Or you can slide your foot back under the body weight. So there's multiple ways to make this happen. This animation is not too crazy mechanically. It's a fairly simple turn, but I just wanted to exaggerate that in the reference. So then this is where the hand releases and he starts to move over. And you can see that the spear is just starting to move. In my reference it was a mop, and then here now the weight has transferred because of two things. Not only has his hips moving over, and his body, you can see, is leaning this direction, right? So there's a lean this way, because if I have his weight back here, he's not going to be able to put his weight, he's not going to be able to lift this back leg. This back leg here, this leg is holding all the weight now. So his weight needs to go forward onto this leg. And the other thing that's helping that is the actual pivot of this foot. You can see where this foot is here. So it's pretty far away from his center of mass. But as it pivots over, now it actually comes screen right under his mass more, along with the combination of him moving his body weight over to screen left over it. So now as you look at this animation pose, you can see it's centered pretty well over that foot and completely goes on top of it here, which allows this leg to lift up. And now this leg is in the air on this breakdown, right? This breakdown key, as he pivots around himself and then plants this foot. And when he plants this foot, you can see this back foot starts to lift up. I just used a little foot roll here, and you can also use this twist control, which is kind of nice when a character is pivoting, right? So you can start to like do this type of thing. I didn't do that much, but I did a little bit. Here it's 0, here it's 17. If I did it 0, you can see his foot is quite pigeon-toed and it looks a little bit awkward. So just adding a little bit of that twist from here to here really helps that feel. But what's happening is his toe is still planted in the same spot, right? The ball of the foot is in the same spot. So there's still weight on that foot, but it's starting to lift. And then now as it goes into the next transition here, which is a breakdown we don't have, so we can add this here. Now it's going to pivot over, right? So here you can see it actually lifts up. So if we use Maya in between, and in the reference I actually pivoted around my heel, right? And then it plants over. So we could try using that reference, but I don't think it matters also if you actually have this foot completely in the air and then have it plant down in the new location. So if you want to use Maya to help you in between all the rest of these poses, you can. But I'm also looking at the reference, right? And that way I can go back to having everything stepped keys and looking at what's happening in the reference, adjust accordingly. You know, looking at your character in 3D space. So I think in this moment I still want his body weight to be over this screen left foot longer, right? And maybe we just lift his foot more naturally rather than heel first until he plants. So something like that. And then you have the actual transfer of the weight where this foot plants, right? And then you can have the body shift over to that side and plant the staff and then settle back. So this is more than enough poses. It's like every 5 or so frames I have a key pose, right? And if you play this, it's only playing at 15 frames a second, but you can feel more or less that the weight shift is working well. So it's all been blocked out. It didn't take me very long to do this because my reference, I probably spent like an hour or so getting these poses to work. And I just added this breakdown here to show you what else I would add. Before I go into spline, which is the next step, I'll just make sure that this last keys is on the last frame of the animation, frame 60, so it doesn't just freeze. And then we can start to spline. Alright, at this point, I don't really need the reference anymore, so I usually turn it off and just work in Maya, feeling it out in the spline. So the first thing I do is I just turn on auto tangent, and that will make everything already smoothly splined. And at this point, I'll just go work through each body part using the graph editor often. So there's kind of 2 body parts here. There's the spear and there's him. So if I want to, I could start with the spear. It doesn't really matter, but you can just frame through your shot. Like I'm just framing through it, and just feel out, like, does it feel like what the spear is doing is right? Because obviously I can go back and forth between it, and it feels pretty good. I just think that I'd want to have a little more hang time here and have the drop be a little faster. Right now it's really soft, this drop. So if we look at the graph editor, we can see why, right? That this curve is just easing in a flat tangent. So if you make this linear, you can even break the tangent if you want. This will drop much faster, right? And if you take this tangent and free the tangent weight, this is something I often do when I'm cleaning up, and pull the tangent out, you're going to get a little bit more hang time there before it drops, and it'll drop a lot quicker. And then if we look at, I believe it's this, yeah, it's the Z rotation. It's coming down and kind of slows into this, right? So I think I would want to have it ease in even more. So I can set a key here and really pull that over. And maybe have it actually farther up on this moment. So it's moving quickly through this part and quickly gets to its final position. It's probably happening a bit in X as well. Right. So we can play with these curves a little bit. And the other thing, remember, we have the locator and on his hand. So if we want to do stuff with his hand, we can, right? I don't know if we need to, but like here, it feels like it might be nice if his hand was rotated a bit more. I don't know why that's happening. Alright, forget that. So now if I look at his staff, it feels like it has more weight. And now I'm going to work on his body. So I'll always start with the center of mass because that's sort of driving his movement, and I'll look at the graph editor and decide, like, what's going on here? How can I clean this up? How can I make this feel better? And I'll go through each curve, and you can see that there's some weird stuff happening here. Like this is a good example that we can smooth out. So the curves that are the most important are this screen left and right. This is one of those important curves. Obviously the up and down, right? The translate Z is not as important for this animation. It looks like there is a bit of a bump here where he goes from, you know, forward to backwards over his foot and then back again. So we might want to ease into that instead, right? And not have it pop back so quickly. So that curve looks a little prettier. But this curve is not as important because if you move these a lot, you can see from the camera view, it's not changing a lot. But I still want to have this curve look nice. So I just deleted a bunch of those keys, and now this curve more or less is clean. But more important is that these curves are clean. So the first thing I look at is what's happening here at the beginning. Well, it looks like he's moving to the left a little bit. It's like an anticipation, which is nice. You can see his hips drifting to the left, and then it starts to go screen right, right? And at this point, I probably want to have this curve be pretty fluid, so I might just take all of these and delete them, right? Or you could keep the middle one if you wanted, and then you just take these tangents and smooth them out so they feel nice. So this movement eases through here with no hitches, and then at this point it accelerates over, right? So probably we want to have a key here and have this easing in a little smoother so you don't feel that acceleration. Maybe this can be even a little bit farther to the left. And now that looks a lot cleaner, right? And this is the farthest screen left we go, and then we start to go back and hit this point. So at this point, do we want this or not? Right? We can decide if that's necessary. Right now it kind of shoots over. I think we can delete this and have it ease over to this point and then settle back. And maybe we want to go even a little farther, right? We could have it go over and settle back up if we wanted. It depends on how the feel of your animation is. This is also the time to pull the tangent weights out if you feel like it's important. I don't think in this case I would do anything like that, but usually a TY is where you do that. So then we have the TY curve. So from here to here, nothing really happens. You can see it's flat. And maybe if you wanted, you could have it come up a tiny bit. So you could zoom in on this and just have it raise a little bit, as long as his knees don't lock out. And then it shifts over this way. More or less you want him to stay with his knees straight, so probably don't go down as much. You could probably even have it easing up. This is like the high point, right? So you just want to keep it going up until the knee doesn't lock out. And then as he steps over, it starts to go down, take the weight, and then he comes up again over his foot, steps across here. This is where you take the weight. So you could offset this a few frames if you wanted and maybe not have it quite as low. And then he's going to come up again. And maybe you want to have this curve higher so you can feel him come down over these frames, right? And feel that weight. And you can shift these around because now it doesn't matter where the key is. You're feeling the timing of it out. I feel like the down would be around here, and then you can come back up throughout the end of the animation. So that's our TY, and you want to look through and make sure there's no knee pops, and it looks like this knee stretches out a little too much here. So maybe we just need a little bit of foot roll. And then it takes the weight on this leg. So if you don't have that foot roll, you can see this leg kind of locks out here. So going back to the body, you got the translate Y, the translate X, the translate Z. You can look at your rotate curves, right? These generally, you don't need to mess around with too much for something as simple as this. This is the rotate X, forward and back. So it looks like he bends backwards a little through here and then forwards, so we can probably ease these out as he comes back again, and then he does a forward and back at the end. So if you want to clean this up, you can, something like that. The rotate Y curve obviously is quite important. This is his actual turn, and so if you wanted to add, you could add a tiny antic the opposite way, right? Some twists one direction, and then he goes this way, and I would just delete this so this is a nice clean curve. You could probably delete both of these even, maybe not. It changes your animation too much. You can definitely delete that one. and just finessing these curves so it's nice and clean. You get a really nice clean turn in Y. Rotate Z also, it looks like there's a little bit of a glitch in here. Here he's pivoting, he's putting his weight over this leg, so if we wanted to exaggerate that, we could. And then after that, it pivots around this side, puts the weight over this side. And then here you can see it kind of pops back and then pops up again. So at this point, I would probably delete this key. So this is cleaner. And his weight stays over and slowly shifts back the other side. So now you have a nice clean key. You can even delete all of these if you wanted. And everything else is going to work off the center. There's also this breathe mover, right? If you want to have him breathing, you can during this. So maybe he's like taking a breath. There's this auto shoulder setting here on this character, which we can maybe lower. So we can give him a little bit of a breath here. And then an exhale. And then maybe at the end, he could take a little bit of a breath. And then exhale. The rest of these you don't need to worry about. And that way you have your main center working and you just work out from there. So you can check your feet next, make sure what's happening with each foot makes sense, right? I just usually zoom in and frame through. This foot's not really moving much until here. So if you wanted to add a little bit of noise, you could do like a little bit of a toe twist one way or the other. Maybe it twists in a little bit before going out, right? It's probably too much. So maybe just a little bit of twist. It's an antic, tiny bit of foot roll. Starts to lift. So you can see there's something happening in this foot as it comes over. Maybe not that much foot roll. It just isn't completely dead. It's like a little bit of a move as it comes across. It rotates out. You can watch that heel pivot around as it lifts across. It swings through pretty fast through here. And then plants on this end. And you can either plant it toe first or heel first. So if you're going to do this heel first, you might actually want to have it on this frame hit. And then you can feel it kind of compress down over these two frames, right? Could be nice. And then you can see there's a little pivot happening here, but maybe you want to delay that a bit. So it just happens at the end of the move before it does its shift forward. And during its shift forward, probably want to have it lift a little bit, right? So it feels like it sits down and does a natural shift there. And then you go to the next foot and do the same thing. You just watch it and see what's happening. You can see it's just starting to lift up here. So maybe you delay that a few frames. Just starts to lift up. Make sure that there's no knee pop going on. And then as it sets down, you get a nice foot roll plant with the heel coming down after. Pivots again here, lifts, and then at this point maybe we lead it with the toe. So we have a little more foot roll, it comes across, and then plants over a few frames. And then nothing really happens at the end. So you've done your feet, then you can work on your spine here, right? Just check your curves, make sure there's nothing that seems a little funky. This one maybe looks a little funky, we could delete those. Smooth those out a bit. This one probably is unnecessary. And then if you want to add any translation, this would be the time. But I think overall the chest feels good. Just making sure this knee feels like it's moving and twisting with the body. So it's leading the leg a little bit. And then at this point, you just check the head and the arms. So the arms are slowly coming off the hips here. So we just want to counter that wrist back a little bit. Make it feel like the hands are still touching, and then as his hand releases, maybe drag the thumb a little bit. And then his fingers can relax back this direction. And drag this way. And then here at the end, maybe they open a little bit this direction. And then close. So you can get a little overlap on the fingers. You know, checking the wrist and the forearm. It might flip out a little fast here. So you can delete that key and have this ease a little bit more. This arm is dragging behind more, maybe through here, and then swings through, out, farther, overlap, and then can drop in and get to its final point and maybe bounce out a little bit, so there's a little bit of overlap, right? So these are just getting some nice offsetting curves here happening. Dragging his hand, letting it come out. You can add a little bit of that in the shoulder if you want. And then it can settle back up. And then the other arm we already worked on. So then the last thing would be just to check out the face. And the expressions. He does an eye dart here. It's a bit drifty, so we probably want to delay that so it's still looking that way, and then have it move pretty much all the way in one frame, and then push in as he leads where he's gonna go. He's like, oh, what's happening over here? I'm gonna turn, and then during the blink, make sure his pupils come down with the eye blink. And then you don't see his face anymore, really, so it doesn't matter. You can do a head pass to make sure that the head is doing what you want it to do. Maybe turn a little bit more, leading this turn. And then you just do a few play blasts and check out your final results. This feels pretty good to me. Maybe I would tone down this overlap here, so this can come in a little less. Have it come out a little later with the movement. Goes out a little bit farther. And then when it lifts, maybe lift it a bit higher, so the drop has got a little more weight to it. That feels better. So then the next step is just to play blasts and see how it looks. So you just do your last little bit of polish and make sure it's working from all your camera angles, and most importantly your camera, and then you do a nice play blast and you have your final animation. I hope you enjoyed that simple turn demo.